Thank you for being here. I am going to share a little bit about the intersection of personal and collective transformation. And so, in the spirit of Glenn's reminder to be ridiculous, I will try to sum up a 300-page dissertation in the next 5 minutes. So this intersection is based on one hand on my PhD research in alchemy, and on the other hand on our nonprofit work developing an eco-village here in Colorado. And so part one is going to be a journey from the outside in through studying the psychology of alchemy. Let's begin with the basics. What the heck is alchemy? Any ideas? You can shout it out. Gold. Okay, so this is perfect. In a literal, oh, maybe it's the same thing. Gold, lead. In a literal academic sense, people tend to think of alchemy as changing base metals like lead into gold. And what some people don't realize is that's just one part of alchemy. It's called chrysopoeia. And the different metals are actually associated with the 7 planetary energies. And so there's this natural movement of lead, which relates to this Saturnian archetype, through these different layers, ultimately into the solar energy of the sun, which is related to gold, right? The golden light of the sun, just like silver connects to the moon and so on. And so a good place to begin would be the etymology, right? Where does this word alchemy come from? And alchemy likely derives from alchemia, and then before that, alchemet. And Kemet is the original indigenous name for the ancient nation of Egypt that we call Egypt now in North Africa. And some people have noticed that Kemet in the Egyptian language is based on the 3 consonants, KMT, at the root, which literally means black in the ancient Egyptian Kemetic language. And people are debating maybe that refers to the people of Egypt or to the land, perhaps literally the soil of that land being fertile. And it also is used to refer to the tradition, the sacred science of ancient Egypt. And I would suggest that all of those are interconnected. They're not separate. So the people and the land that they're a part of are the nation, right? And there's a deep study in ancient Egypt around the fertility of soil and how to prevent or reverse desertification. Now, of course, the Nile River area has become desertified, which we'll come back to. So in terms of the science of ancient Egypt, it's traced back in the alchemical tradition through the Emerald Tablets to Thoth before Hermes and the legendary Golden Age of Zep-Tepi. And that's all, related to this idea that ancient Egyptian mummification is the real first form of alchemy, related to the transmutation of the soul in the afterlife. There's other perspectives we'll come back to as well. But the real core point here that I want to drive home is that black soil, that rich, dark, fertile earth, is what in alchemy we would call the prima materia, the first matter, the primal material, right? And so in this understanding of alchemy, the metals were actually traditionally seen as a seed. And the seed of each metal was seen as being planted in that fertile soil of the first matter. And by nature, these seeds were growing like a plant towards the sunlight, meaning each metal was already really slowly, organically becoming gold, they believed, over time. And they also recognized the elements, the 4 elements, as feeding that process and worked with the elements in the laboratory to try and speed up that process. And it's important to note that this isn't actually just a European alchemical idea. It begins with ancient indigenous traditions all over the world, and you can see here the Bakongo cosmogram from Africa. That shows, again, this natural cycle of how things tend to mature and transform and transmute over time in relation to the elements. And so what the purpose of alchemy was to take that natural transformation process and apply fire to speed it up. So the fire was like a little bit of sunlight that you're bringing to that metal that's already turning into gold, and you're intentionally making it golden faster, more intensely. And so that's like this spurring forth of that growth towards the light. Now, this is where I want to come back to what is the real origin of alchemy. If this is how alchemists were working, then fire keeping and ceremonial fires, fire ceremony would be the true origin of alchemy. And when you hear me talk about Thoth and the Golden Age, it doesn't sound very scientific or academic. But in science and scholarship, we know that fire ceremonies are likely over 1 to 2 million years old. And so that suggests that alchemy itself could be as old as our species, or older. And that word on there, prisa sapientia, means primeval knowledge, primordial knowledge, which is how alchemy refers to itself. And it suggests that that may be true, that this may actually be a primordial science. So, the fire of transformation. What is that alchemical process if we look at it psychologically? What does it mean about ourselves? Well, we could perhaps consider that everyone and everything in the universe, like the Bakongo cosmogram suggests, is growing towards its highest potential, perhaps. That there's a psychological maturation, a spiritual growth that's happening naturally. And that everybody's on that path, whether they realize it or not. And maybe we can think of people that we don't think are growing, but the idea is everybody ultimately is going through that process, and it just is very slow and roundabout. And so alchemy becomes engaging that personal development consciously and intentionally to intensify and accelerate it with the fire of transformation. And you can see here in this old engraving that even the medieval European alchemists were likely suggesting that with these cryptic diagrams, because here the alchemist is the one in the steam bath, undergoing the purification, doing it to themselves instead of to the metal. So all of this is leading to the completion of the great work, the magnum opus, finding the philosopher's stone, which is said to perfect any material that it comes in contact with, right? And another way to look at this in alchemical terms would be in terms of rubedo, or the reddening. If you imagine like a tiny red drop of red tincture going into a glass of transparent water, then all of that water suddenly turns red, just like the stain. And so this is the understanding that there's a conjunction between our inner work and the change in the world around us. And as we transform, naturally everything we're coming into contact with and influencing is transforming with us. Or as Naropa might say, transform yourself, transform the world. So this brings us to part 2, which is moving from the inside back out. And here I'll just share a little bit about our work with our nonprofit, because what we've been looking at, if we can switch, is kind of this whole heady, conceptual, esoteric topic, right? And then the question becomes, how do we take that inner work and that study and practice and bring that out into the world and influence society, make it practical? So we're attempting to answer that question in our eco-village that we're developing on 40 acres, a couple hours south of here, near Pikes Peak, as it's known today. The traditional Uto-Aztecan name for Pikes Peak is Tava Kavi, which means mountain of the sun, and again relates to that solar energy. So just a little bit about our projects. This year we finished converting an upcycled yurt that used to be at the Denver Zoo into an event space. Speaking of solar energy, we've also installed our solar power system that we rely on for power in the community. And a lot of these projects are done with support from volunteers and community members on the land there. This year, we actually also, right now, began installing our first subterranean greenhouses, and you can come help out if you'd like next week. The greenhouses have what's called a geothermal climate system underneath them without using electricity. That's going to enable us to grow food year-round, all 4 seasons. We're also innovating different architectural designs, so we just put in these collapsible multi-use dorm rooms that fold out to create a private bedroom and back in for a large event space. And of course, back to that first matter, we're doing soil building work because there is desertification happening in the valley near here. And we're actually using worm compost and hugelkultur and mycology and so on to turn that earth black again and make it fertile, which enables us to plant trees. And we actually just put dozens and dozens of baby trees in from the local Forest Service as well. And lastly, we have our long-term land design plans that we're working on, which are going to have these partially submerged structures with passive cooling based on all kinds of sacred geometry. You can see the greenhouses we're putting in there. And there'll be larger earth mounds with terracing for more greenery, and a stupa based on the 4 elements in the center of the village there. We're actually excavating for this right now and open to investors and collaborators. It's very grassroots. We also have regular gatherings and programs. We've done Heartfire Festival events here at Naropa. We do events at our land, and actually all over the world. And if you can't make it in person, then we're starting to offer online content as well through our academy, a regular podcast, and online courses. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much. Hopefully there's some both and relevance there. And if you would like to come visit the land, our next event is a drum making ceremony with some guest teachers coming at the end of November. So you can sign up there. Thank you all again. Peace.
Thank you.